Hi friends, welcome back to the channel. This is Ina Maybon of LightCycleAstrology.com. Today, friends, we are getting into the trine that is forming in the sky between Mercury and Uranus. And this is an aspect that has some history to it because Mercury has recently gone through that retrograde period in Capricorn. So let's go ahead and pull up the real-time clock and get a look at the transit before we jump into the meaning here. So if we go back to December the 7th, we see that Mercury enters Capricorn and then heads towards the first pass where it forms that trine to Uranus in Taurus right around December the 15th, perfects around the 18th. And then if we keep going forward, we're going to head towards Mercury's station to turn retrograde, which happens right around the end of the year, December 28th. 29, and then Mercury begins to move backwards back into that aspect to Uranus that takes place right around January the 7th and 8th, and then will retrograde out of that aspect, which will be the second time that it goes through it, and then eventually stations to turn direct right around January the 17th, not too long ago from right now, and then is going to now move forward for the third time that it makes this hit to Uranus by trine that begins around January the 26th, this Thursday, perfects right around Sunday this weekend, and then takes until about February the 2nd or so, late Wednesday or Thursday of next week, where it finally separates out of that 3-degree range of orb that we like to see for the most potent moment of an aspect. So what does it all mean? Let's jump into some of the meaning now. Mercury is to the right of Uranus in that dominant or superior position from the standpoint of looking from the center of the chart outward. And that superior position is going to afford Mercury the dominance in the exchange of information or action. So how do we see this happening in the world? It's going to be that mercurial Capricornian kind of quality that is hurtled towards Uranus. And Uranus is sort of the one left there having to deal with whatever Mercury throws at it, right? So what kinds of things could Mercury throw at Uranus? Well, Mercury is a god of chaos. Mercury is a god of markets and exchange and movement, sports, even thieves. Mercury is a god of communication, technology, and science. Well, why is that? Well, in the ancient world, the ancient astrologers, as they were observing the nighttime sky and they were watching the planets move around, they noticed that Mercury seemed to move, first of all, very quickly in its orbit around the sun, but it also had that appearance of going in and out of retrogrades very rapidly and often. It also moved under the beams of the sun and out of the beams of the sun, becoming visible and invisible. So it became eventually connected to the god that is very rapid, delivering messages of the sun to beings down here on the planet, and going through periods where it seemed to be able to go into the underworld and come out of the underworld again. Mercury is also the Lord host of Gemini and Virgo. It has the same connotation where both of these signs are places that take apart the light. And what I mean by that is at the time of Cancer, when Cancer begins, that is the zenith of the sun's declination. The arc of the sun reaches its zenith. It's the longest day of the year. But from that point forward, sunlight or daylight decreases slowly day after day. That's because the sun is now sinking in declination, coming back towards the earth. So the time right before the beginning of Cancer is that second half of Gemini. And so Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury's job is to sort of take apart the light and prepare the light to go through a period of decline. The same thing happens during Virgo when we get to Libra. It is the beginning of the dark half of the year, where for 6 months there is more nighttime or darkness in a 24-hour period than there is daylight in that same 24-hour period. So Virgo is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury's job, again, is to sort of take apart the old order of light. So Mercury has this connection to the sun. It's being very close to the sun. It goes in and out of the underworld. It was the psychopomp. So what does the psychopomp do when it's running through a Saturn feminine cardinal sign like Capricorn? Well, I think what it does is it might take apart markets or exchange markets that have to do with earthly commodities. It might also have to do with sports. Maybe athletes getting injured because Capricorn is opposite to the moon's temple, and the moon is associated with the body. So the body is seen to be in contrariety in Capricorn. And there's this connection maybe with something being very far away from the body, or the concern for the body being very, very, ignored to the point where people are working hard and maybe getting injured. So Mercury as a god that is associated with sports and sports teams. We've seen some recent news, of course, in the sports world to things of this effect. We've also seen layoffs. These are all indicators of the god Mercury sort of running through the sign of Capricorn. Communications. Could this be like, for example, somebody coming along and saying, I need you to do all of these things for me. I'm going to task you with these duties, right? Because Saturn is a god associated with duties and responsibilities. So these are the types of things. Capricorn is also a place of austerity because Saturn is a god that tries to limit or restrict resources at times. So you could see the exchange of markets or resources being restricted, people's money or purse strings sort of being tied. Maybe there isn't enough money to go around, or you have to be real frugal right now. These are all ways in which we could see Mercury running through the sign of Capricorn. But now Mercury, I think, unintentionally hurled these types of things towards Uranus in Taurus. Why is it unintentional? Well, this is my theory. Now, this isn't something that I was taught, and it's not something that I've heard anywhere, but this is my theory based on my studies. And it has to do with visibility. So in the ancient world, visibility was extremely important because it was a symbol of manifestation. If a planet was visible, like all of the 7 planets were during certain times, you could see Mercury, you could see Venus and Mars, you could see the moon, you could see Saturn, and you could see Jupiter, but you could not see Uranus. It wasn't discovered until later. So what's very interesting is that visibility was a symbol for things that could manifest themselves on the Earth. So if a planet was doing something and it was visible, it wasn't under the beams of the sun, or it was in the right sect. These were all considerations that were taken into account that gave the meaning of like, okay, if this planet is visible, it will have power to manifest things, actual things. It will represent things that happen. If the planet is invisible, it may be weaker, it may not happen, or it may not happen visibly in the world. So, for instance, if Mercury is retrograded under the beams, there's a connotation of like, well, you may try to affect some kind of communication with somebody, but it may not work out. You may go unheard. So Uranus is a god that is always invisible, for the most part to the naked eye. Now, technically, Uranus can be seen with the naked eye, but it's so faint that it requires the utmost perfect dark conditions to see it, and you have to be really good. So by and large, it's considered an invisible planet to the naked eye. Saturn was the last visible planet in the ancient world. So my theory is this. I think that Mercury as a messenger god, normally, his activities involve him trying to deliver announcements or messages, mail, emails, all kinds of new inventions or sciences. But how can a messenger deliver a message to a planet that it cannot behold, right? Mercury is further away from Uranus than we are. We're the 3rd planet in the solar system from the sun. So we technically have a closer vantage point to the god Uranus, or the planet Uranus, rather. But if Mercury is even further away than we are, I don't think that Uranus is visible to Mercury. So based on how important visibility was to the ancient astrologers for symbolic meaning of manifestation, I'm wondering, my question is that can Mercury be communicating about something, and could those communications unintentionally be hurtled towards Uranus and cause Uranus to react in that unprovoked, seemingly out of the blue way? I think that invisibility factor that Uranus has is the reason that Uranus is connected to sudden or shocking surprises that seem to happen out of the blue. That's my theory, is that because the other planets, they may make aspects to Uranus, and those will have some kind of symbolism, but I don't think it's intentional, or it seems to come out of nowhere because there is no visibility to Uranus. So I think when the other planets are beholding Uranus, they're not really seeing him, or they don't intend to see him, or it's like subconscious or subliminal. So that's the thing right off the bat that I think is important with this aspect is, could you and your boss be having a conversation and a coworker overhears that? Could somebody be eavesdropping? Could something beneficial happen due to the nature of the aspect being a trine that is out of the blue, seemingly because Mercury is just doing mercurial types of things, and Uranus receives that unintentional communication or action? I think that that could be an interesting thing to watch for. So what are the things that this could potentially have to do with? Let's take a look back at what Mercury has already signified or represented or reflected to us, because this is something that we are on our third pass at. Back in December the 17th, if you check out the news, this was right around the time where Sam Bankman-Fried was indicted on fraud charges for cryptocurrency exchange for the FTX. Now, this is very interesting because obviously this story was huge because it was unprecedented. It has that Uranian quality of being like never before seen, right? It's like all of history plays out, all of the whole ancient history plays out. And then in the modern time, here comes Herschel, and it's like, boom, he discovers this new planet in the solar system. That's huge. That's monumental. It's unprecedented. So this whole fraud, right? And Mercury has this association with thieves, right? Well, it seems to be what this man has done, or what he's at least charged with, is fraud of a cryptocurrency. There you are, Mercury, right? The planet associated with technology and currency, cryptocurrency exchange. All three of those words are mercurial words. But there was an unprecedented bringing of justice, like a seemingly out of the blue, like bam. I remember when this story came out, I never heard of this guy, right? I didn't know who he was. And all of a sudden, this is the biggest, this like, I think they said it dwarfed the, Madoff scandal. So this is a huge thing. And interestingly enough, Uranus having to filter through Venus, as Venus is the ruler of Taurus. Venus has sometimes that connection with justice, right? Or with social things. So I think there was this very unprecedented justice that sort of came through. It seemed to come out of the blue. I think that's a really good example for a first pass of this aspect that we saw back in December. Now, during retrograde, it went back through this trine aspect. And at that time, there were the whole dramas happening for the Speaker of the House. And also this was connected to questions of, should we raise the debt ceiling, or what are we going to do about the debt ceiling? So again, you see politics having this connection with Venusian things, right? Politicians have to be very charming. And we're talking about, choosing a political leader in a social context to some degree. But this was also connected to that debt ceiling of a nation, which is very Capricornian, very Mercury, sort of having to do with an entire, debt of a country, not just of like a person on a bigger scale. Also, they were talking about this as if it was sort of unprecedented. Now, I actually think that that is a falsity. I think that they were also saying that it has happened before to a much larger degree, but certainly in our lifetimes, I guess it could be thought of as an unprecedented event. So that was also something that was taking place. Now, another first time pass of this aspect back in December of 2022, on the 16th of December, there was this interesting and not great and sad event where people were injured at a London concert. So there you have this event that seems to come out of the blue, and it's chaotic, and it has this just weird vibe to it, where people are trying to get into this concert in London, and I guess there weren't enough tickets, or people decided they were going to go revolutionary style, right? Very Uranian, and they were just going to start trampling people, and people got injured, but it was because they were trying to get into an art concert, right? Uranus in Taurus, having this connection with Venusian things. Okay, and then my last example, bringing us for the second pass of this during the retrograde by January 8th, there was this interesting article. Actually, I'm going to share this here. Not the article, but just my notes on the article here. So there was this very interesting article where this is taken from ABC News. There was a art professor. There you go. Mercury having this connection to Venus by Trine. An art professor announces a lawsuit against the Minnesota University because she was dismissed after she held up after a Muslim student objected to depictions of her holding up a picture of the Prophet Muhammad in her global art course. While the university admits to a misstep, sort of an out of the blue kind of thing, right? And plans to hold public conversations about academic freedom. There you go, that connection with Uranus and freedom. So I think you get the spirit of this aspect. So in summary, I would say expect things that are out of the blue like we typically do with Uranus, but I think it connects to that invisibility that Uranus has. So Mercury may be connecting to Uranus in a way that just isn't visible or is unintentional. So right off the bat, I would expect maybe a mix of good and bad. We have a good aspect, but it's happening through the superior position of Mercury in a Saturn-ruled sign, and Saturn sometimes brings difficult things. So I would expect something good and bad, unexpected, that has to do with money or exchange or sports or anything that has that real mercurial quality. So could we see layoffs? Well, they're already talking about layoffs in the technology sector of the industries and things of that sort. So this is just a real interesting aspect. This is one that is probably going to fly below the radar of most people on a personal level. It may show up in your chart personally, but it may take a while for you to even notice it. It may go completely unnoticed. So this is an aspect that does have the potential where it may not be completely obvious what's happening. Or if something does seem to represent the energies, you won't find out until later, or it's somehow unconscious or working on that subliminal level. So maybe meditation or any kind of spiritual thing might be interesting to do to connect with this energy. But overall, by and large, I think that it's going to be very subtle. So that's what I have for today. Thanks for checking out this aspect, and leave me a comment in the comment section if you notice anything about this, just because it's just such an interesting and unique aspect that is forming in the sky that is lasting for about this next week or so, mixed in with all of the other more powerful and prominent aspects like the Sun trying to Mars and Venus moving into the sign of Pisces, which is happening also around the same time that this aspect begins. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll be back again with another astrology video. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.